In the sweltering heat of a Louisiana afternoon, badge number removed, Officer Bryce Harlan thought he was the apex predator. He saw a luxury SUV, a black driver, and an opportunity to flex his authority. He didn't know that the man behind the wheel wasn't just a civilian. He was Special Agent Darius Kane, a federal operative currently spearheading a massive internal corruption sting. Officer Bryce Harlan dismantled the agent's dignity, mocking his badge and violating his rights. He thought he was untouchable, but Officer Bryce Harlan's world was about to implode. The hunter was about to become the prey. This was the story of how arrogance ended a career. The heat radiating off the asphalt on Interstate 10, just outside of Baton Rouge, was enough to distort the air. It was a humid, oppressive day. Inside his unmarked charcoal gray Dodge Charger, Special Agent Darius Kane adjusted the air conditioning vent. He was tired. He'd been awake for a long stretch straight, coordinating a multi-state task force focused on a racketeering ring moving through the Gulf Coast. He wasn't in uniform. He was wearing a faded gray hoodie, cargo pants, and a pair of worn-out Timberlands. To the untrained eye, he looked like just another guy heading home from a long shift. That was exactly the problem for Officer Bryce Harlan. Bryce Harlan was parked in the median, his cruiser engine idling. He was on the force for some time, a man who had earned a reputation in the precinct, not for his closure rate, but for his activity. He liked stops. He liked finding reasons. When Darius Kane's rented Chevy Tahoe cruised past at a legal speed in a 70 zone, Bryce Harlan didn't see a careful driver. He saw a target. He pulled out, accelerating aggressively to close the gap. He didn't turn his lights on immediately. He rode the bumper of the Tahoe, tailgating dangerously close, trying to provoke a reaction. This was a classic tactic: intimidate the driver into making a mistake, a swerve, a sudden brake, speeding up to create distance. Darius checked his rear-view mirror. His eyes narrowed. He recognized the maneuver instantly. Aggressive pacing. He kept his cruise control locked. He didn't flinch. When the tactic didn't work, Bryce Harlan hit the lights. The red and blue strobes pierced the bright afternoon sun. Darius sighed, tapped his brakes, and signaled right, pulling over onto the dusty shoulder of the highway, safely and slowly. Inside the cruiser, Bryce Harlan was already running the plate. It came back to a rental agency. Clean. But in Bryce Harlan's mind, a rental car was a red flag. It meant a drug mule. It meant out-of-town money. It meant he could probably seize some cash under civil forfeiture laws if he pushed hard enough. Darius rolled down all four windows, standard procedure, to show he had nothing to hide, and placed both hands on the steering wheel at the 10 and 2 positions. He kept his movements slow. He knew the statistics. He knew that despite his federal credentials, in this moment, he was just a black man in a hoodie on a lonely stretch of highway. Bryce Harlan approached the passenger side first, resting heavily on the grip of his holstered Glock. He peered in, scanning the back seat, empty save for a duffel bag. He circled around to the driver's side. He didn't say hello. He didn't ask for license and registration. "You know you were weaving back there," Bryce Harlan lied. His voice was flat, bored, but laced with an undercurrent of menace. Darius looked at him, his face impassive. "Officer, my lane assist is on. The car corrects itself if I even touch the line. I haven't left the center of the lane since I passed the state line." Bryce Harlan smirked. He hated it when they talked back. "License now." Darius moved one hand slowly to his pocket. "It's in my wallet, back right pocket. I'm reaching for it now." "Just get it," Bryce Harlan snapped. Darius produced his Louisiana driver's license and handed it over. Bryce Harlan snatched it, looking from the plastic card to Darius's face, then back again. "Darius." Bryce Harlan read the name with mock familiarity. "Where are you headed, Darius?" "I'm heading to a meeting in New Orleans," Darius replied calmly. "In a rental? My personal vehicle is in the shop." "Uh-huh." Bryce Harlan leaned in, his face inches from the window. "You look nervous, Darius. You shaking? You got something in the car I should know about? Guns, knives, bazookas?" Darius's voice dropped an octave. It became professional and cold. "Officer, I have a service weapon secured in a lockbox in the trunk. I am a federal agent. My credentials are in the glove box. If you allow me, I will show them to you. This was the off-ramp. This was the moment Bryce Harlan could have walked away. A smart cop would have paused, checked the credentials, and sent him on his way with a nod of professional courtesy. But Bryce Harlan wasn't a smart cop. He was a bully who had just been challenged. He let out a short, sharp laugh. "A Fed? You?" He looked at the hoodie. He looked at the scuffed boots. "Yeah, and I'm the director of the CIA. Don't lie to me, boy. It makes things worse." Darius's jaw tightened. "Check the glove box." "Get out of the car," Bryce Harlan commanded, stepping back and unholstering his taser. "Step out of the vehicle now." The air along the highway was thick with tension. Darius stepped out slowly, hands visible. He turned and placed his hands on the roof of the car as instructed. Bryce Harlan patted him down roughly, his hands lingering too long, searching for anything he could use against him. He found the wallet with the credentials. He flipped it open and saw the gold shield. For a second, silence hung heavy over the highway. Bryce Harlan stared at the badge. A reasonable person would have stopped. A reasonable person would have realized the gravity of the error. But Bryce Harlan's ego was a fragile thing. He reasoned that if he backed down now, he'd look weak. He'd look like a fool. He had to double down. He had to find something, anything to justify the stop. If he found drugs, the badge wouldn't matter. If he found an illegal weapon, the badge was fake. He tossed the badge onto the passenger seat with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Nice prop," he shouted back at Darius. "Where'd you get it? eBay?" Darius didn't respond. He was memorizing details. Badge number removed. Name tag Harlan. Unit number removed. Bryce Harlan moved to the back seat. He grabbed the duffel bag. He unzipped it. Inside, he found a laptop, a change of clothes, and a sealed heavy-duty Pelican case. "Jackpot," Bryce Harlan whispered. He hauled the Pelican case out and slammed it onto the trunk of the car, right next to Darius's hands. "Open it," Bryce Harlan demanded. "That case contains classified federal surveillance equipment," Darius said, his voice deadly calm. "If you open that case without a federal warrant, or my direct authorization, you are committing a felony. You are interfering with an active federal investigation." Bryce Harlan smirked. "I don't need a warrant. I have probable cause. Open it or I break the lock." "I am giving you a lawful order to stand down, Officer Harlan." "You don't give orders here," Bryce Harlan screamed, losing his composure. He grabbed his baton and smashed it down onto the padlock of the case. The sound of metal on metal rang out like a gunshot. The baton strike dented the plastic, but didn't break the lock. Bryce Harlan, red-faced and sweating profusely, struck it again and again. Darius watched, his heart rate steady despite the adrenaline. He knew what was inside that case. It wasn't drugs. It wasn't money. It was a prototype listening device and a hard drive containing months of wiretap audio from the New Orleans crime syndicate. Evidence that was critical to a case the DOJ had been building for years. If Bryce Harlan broke that drive, he wasn't just ruining a case. He was destroying millions of dollars in taxpayer resources. "Officer, stop!" Darius shouted, turning his head. "Turn around," Bryce Harlan roared. He abandoned the baton and went for a pry bar in his trunk. He jammed it under the lid of the Pelican case. With a sickening crack, the latch gave way. The lid popped open. Bryce Harlan peered inside, expecting bricks of cocaine. Instead, he saw complex circuit boards, wires, a black hard drive labeled property of ESG Top Secret, and a strange metallic sphere. Bryce Harlan paused. He blinked. He poked the sphere with his finger. "What is this junk?" Bryce Harlan muttered. He looked at the hard drive. He picked it up, turning it over in his greasy hands. "Put that down," Darius said. "That is evidence in a RICO case." "It looks like bomb parts to me," Bryce Harlan improvised. "Yeah, domestic terrorism. That's what this is." He looked at Darius with a gleam of triumph. "You're not a Fed. You're a terrorist." Just then, a second cruiser skidded to a halt behind Bryce Harlan's car. Dust billowed up. Sergeant Wade Griffin stepped out. He was an older man, heavy-set with a mustache that looked like a push broom. He hitched up his belt and waddled over, chewing on a toothpick. "What you got, Harlan?" Griffin called out, ignoring the man standing with his hands on the car. "Sarge, this guy's dirty," Bryce Harlan yelled, waving the classified hard drive in the air like a trophy. "Claims he's FBI, fake badge. And look at this. Looks like an IED kit in the trunk." Griffin walked up to the trunk. He looked at the shattered Pelican case. He looked at the high-tech equipment. Then he looked at Darius. Griffin had been a cop for many years. He knew what cheap electronics looked like, and he knew what government tech looked like. A seed of doubt planted itself in his gut. "You checked the badge?" Griffin asked quietly. "Yeah, fake as hell," Bryce Harlan scoffed. Griffin walked over to the passenger seat and picked up the wallet Bryce Harlan had discarded. He ran his thumb over the badge. He felt the weight of it. He looked at the ID. The holographic overlay shimmered in the sun. Griffin's stomach dropped. He'd seen fake IDs. He'd confiscated hundreds. This felt real. He looked at the name, Darius Kane. Griffin walked over to Darius. "Turn around, son." Darius turned. He looked Griffin dead in the eye. "Sergeant, I need you to listen to me very carefully. That hard drive in your officer's hand contains classified data. If he drops it, or if he exposes it to a magnet, or if he enters it into your local evidence locker, the U.S. Attorney General will personally come down here and dismantle your department." Griffin hesitated. He looked at Bryce Harlan, who was busy rummaging through Darius's laptop bag. "Now, Harlan," Griffin barked. "Hold up a second." "I got him, Sarge. I'm finding the stash," Bryce Harlan yelled back, high on adrenaline. "Harlan, bring me that ID. Sarge, he's lying." "Bring it here." Bryce Harlan stomped over, annoyed. "Look at it. It's a prop." Griffin held the ID up. "Dispatch, this is Unit 102. Run a federal verification on a badge number." He read the number off the back of the card. There was a long pause. The radio remained silent for an agonizing stretch. Then the dispatcher's voice came back, sounding different, tense. "Unit 102, hold your traffic. We are transferring you to the watch commander. Stand by." Bryce Harlan frowned. "What's that about?" Griffin's face went pale. "That's not good, Bryce. That's really not good." Suddenly, Darius's phone, which was sitting on the hood of the car where Bryce Harlan had thrown it, began to ring. And then it kept ringing. Darius looked at Griffin. "That's my supervisor. He tracks my phone. He knows I've been stationary." Griffin stared at the ringing phone. The screen displayed a name, Burke. "Answer it," Griffin whispered, fear creeping into his voice. "I can't," Darius said, nodding to his hands on the roof. "I'm being detained." Bryce Harlan scoffed. "Don't let him answer that. Probably his accomplice." Griffin ignored Bryce Harlan. He grabbed the phone and hit speaker. "Kane, where the hell are you?" The voice on the other end was booming, authoritative, and angry. Griffin cleared his throat. This is Sergeant Griffin with the Louisiana State Police. I have Mr. Kane detained." "Detained?" The voice turned to ice. "Who is this?" "Sergeant Griffin, we initiated a traffic stop. You have Special Agent Kane detained." "Is he injured?" "No, sir, he is." "Is his vehicle secure?" "Well, we are conducting a search." "You are searching a federal vehicle." The voice roared so loud the speaker distorted. "Listen to me closely, Sergeant. You are to cease and assist immediately. You are to secure Agent Kane's safety. I am tracking his GPS. I see he is on I-10. I have a tactical team miles out returning from a raid. I am redirecting them to your location. If one hair on his head is out of place, if one piece of evidence in that car is compromised, I will have your badge, your pension, and your freedom. Do you understand me?" The line went dead. Griffin stood there, holding the phone like it was a live grenade. Bryce Harlan looked at Griffin confused. "Sarge, who was that?" Griffin looked at Bryce Harlan with a mixture of rage and terror. "You idiot! You absolute idiot! What? He's bluffing." "Unlock him," Griffin ordered. "Uncuff him right now." "No!" Bryce Harlan shouted. "He was speeding. He has bomb parts. I'm the arresting officer. This is my caller." "Bryce, That was the special agent in charge of the New Orleans FBI field office. I don't care. I'm not letting him go. Bryce Harlan was in too deep. His brain couldn't process the retreat. He grabbed Darius's arm and twisted it behind his back. You're under arrest. Stop resisting. Darius didn't resist. He didn't have to. He just looked at Griffin. You can't stop him, Sergeant. You're the supervisor. If you don't stop him, you're complicit. Griffin lunged forward. Bryce Harlan shoved Griffin back. Back off. I'm securing the suspect. Bryce Harlan dragged Darius toward the cruiser. You're going to jail, Fed boy. He shoved Darius into the back of the cruiser and slammed the door. Bryce Harlan walked back to the Tahoe to grab the evidence. He was muttering to himself, convinced he was right, convinced he was going to be a hero. He didn't hear the low rumble in the distance. He didn't hear it until it became a roar. The roar grew from a low hum to a deafening vibration that shook the dust off the hood of Bryce Harlan's cruiser. Bryce Harlan froze, his hand hovering over the shattered remains of the Pelican case. He looked up, squinting against the sun. It wasn't just a sound. It was a physical force. Over the overpass, a quarter-mile down, a black helicopter banked hard, its rotors chopping the humid air with violence. On its side, in stark white letters, was FBI. It hovered low, kicking up a storm of debris. The sniper in the side door, clearly visible, tracking the scene through a scope. Simultaneously, the highway behind Griffin's cruiser was suddenly swarmed. It wasn't the local sheriff. It wasn't state troopers. 3 black Chevrolet Suburbans, riding high on run-flat tires with grill guards and tinted windows, tore across the median, ignoring the traffic laws Bryce Harlan held so dear. They boxed in the 2 police cruisers with tactical precision, creating a fortress of steel. Doors flew open before the vehicles even came to a full stop. Federal agents, hands, show me your hands. 6 men poured out. They were geared up for war. Plate carriers, tactical helmets, AR-15 raised and locked. These were not beat cops. This was the FBI's hostage rescue team, HRT, the elite of the elite, diverted from their raid. Bryce Harlan stood paralyzed. His brain couldn't compute the shift. Seconds ago, he was the god of this highway. Now, he was looking down the barrels of 6 federal rifles. Drop the bag! Drop it now! A lead agent screamed, advancing on Bryce Harlan. Bryce Harlan dropped the hard drive. It clattered onto the asphalt. Hands on your head. Interlace your fingers. Turn away from the sound of my voice. Griffin was already on his knees, hands high in the air, shouting, I'm unarmed. I'm Sergeant Griffin. Don't shoot. Bryce Harlan, however, was slow. He was stunned. I'm a police officer, he stammered, pointing to his chest. I'm the arresting. Get on the ground. Last warning. An agent moved in. Swift, efficient, and brutal. He didn't wait for Bryce Harlan to comply. He swept Bryce Harlan's legs, sending the officer crashing face first into the gravel. Bryce Harlan's wind left him in a wheezing gasp. A knee pressed into his back, pinning him with the weight of authority he usually reserved for others. Officer 492, you are detained. The agent barked. Another agent wearing a vest marked Burke bypassed the chaos and went straight to the back of Bryce Harlan's cruiser. He peered through the window. Darius, you good? Darius Kane, sitting in the cramped back seat, handcuffed and sweating, managed a dry smile. Took you guys long enough. The AC in here sucks. Agent Burke, the special agent in charge, didn't smile back. He was furious. He opened the door. Get him out of there. He ordered a junior agent. And get those cuffs off him now. Darius stepped out of the cruiser. He rubbed his wrists where the steel had bitten into his skin. He took a deep breath of fresh air. He looked at the scene. Bryce Harlan face down in the dirt, Griffin shaking on his knees, and the Pelican case lying open on the trunk of the rental. Darius walked over to Bryce Harlan. The young officer was spitting gravel, his face pressed sideways against the road. He looked up, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and dawning horror. Darius leaned down. I told you, Bryce. I told you to check the glove box. The silence that followed the securing of the scene was heavier than the noise of the arrival. The highway had been shut down by the feds. Traffic was backed up for miles. Agent Burke walked over to Griffin. Stand up, Sergeant. Griffin scrambled to his feet, dusting off his knees. "Sir, I tried to tell him. You heard me on the phone. I tried to stop him." "Did you?" Agent Burke asked, his voice low and dangerous. "Because I saw my agent in the back of a cruiser, and I saw you standing there watching. That's deprivation of rights under color of law, Sergeant. That's a federal crime. You're looking at years. Easy." Griffin paled. I called dispatch. I ran the badge." "You hesitated," Darius said, walking up. He accepted a bottle of water from a tactical officer. "But you did try to de-escalate at the end. I'll put that in my report. It might save your pension. Maybe." Darius turned his attention to Bryce Harlan, who was being hauled to his feet by two HRT operators. Bryce Harlan's uniform was dusty, his sunglasses broken. He looked small. "Uncuff him," Darius said. The agents looked at Darius surprised. "Sir, uncuff him. I want him to hand me my property." The agents released Bryce Harlan. The officer rubbed his arms, trying to regain some shred of dignity. He looked at Darius, then at Burke, then at the ring of federal agents. "This is a misunderstanding," Bryce Harlan tried, his voice trembling. "He was speeding. He was aggressive. I followed protocol." "You destroyed federal property," Darius said, pointing to the Pelican case. "You illegally seized evidence. You profiled a federal agent, and you kidnapped me." "Kidnapped? I arrested you. On what charges?" Agent Burke stepped in. "Impersonating an officer. You had his credentials. You chose to ignore them. That's not a mistake, Officer Harlan. That's malice." Darius walked over to the trunk of the rental. He picked up the battered Pelican case. He inspected the hard drive. The casing was cracked, but the port looked intact. He looked at Bryce Harlan. "I'm giving you the chance to explain to me why I shouldn't have you booked into federal holding tonight." Bryce Harlan blinked. "What?" "In the car before you dragged me out, I told you that you were making a mistake. You didn't listen. Now I'm telling you that you have the chance to explain to me why I shouldn't have you booked into federal holding tonight." Bryce Harlan puffed out his chest, a last-ditch effort to assert dominance. "I did my job. You fit the description." "What description?" Darius asked softly. "A black man in a nice car." "A drug trafficker," Bryce Harlan yelled. "Rental car, out-of-state plates, no luggage visible, nervous behavior." "I wasn't nervous," Darius corrected. "I was polite. I knew my rights. You just didn't like that I wasn't afraid of you." Darius pulled out his phone. He tapped the screen. "And here's the kicker, Bryce. You said you smelled marijuana." "I did. Strong odor." Darius turned the phone screen toward Bryce Harlan. It was a live readout from the rental car's internal telemetry system, which Darius had synced to his bureau phone. "This car is equipped with internal air quality sensors. It logs particulate matter, smoke, vape, alcohol." Darius scrolled down. "Air quality has been pure for the last stretch. 0 traces of smoke. 0. Darius looked at Agent Burke. "He fabricated probable cause. It's a dirty stop." Bryce Harlan's face went white. The smell of weed was his golden ticket. It was the lie that couldn't be disproven until technology caught up. "That machine is wrong," Bryce Harlan stammered. "And your body cam?" Darius pointed to the camera on Bryce Harlan's chest. "Is that wrong too? Because I'm going to pull that footage, and I'm going to pull the dash cam audio from your cruiser, and I'm going to hear you call me boy. I'm going to hear you ignore my identification." Agent Burke nodded to the HRT agents. "That's enough. Hook him up." The clink of handcuffs sounded different this time. When Bryce Harlan had cuffed Darius, it was aggressive, rough, a power move. When the federal agents cuffed Bryce Harlan, it was mechanical. It was indifferent. He was just a package to be processed. "Officer Bryce Harlan," Darius said, reciting the words from memory. "You are under arrest for violation of Title 18, United States Code, Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law. You are also being charged with obstruction of justice, destruction of government property, and false imprisonment." Bryce Harlan struggled as they walked him toward one of the black Suburbans. "You can't do this. I have qualified immunity. I'm a cop." "Qualified immunity protects you from civil lawsuits when you make a mistake," Darius said, walking alongside him. It doesn't protect you from criminal charges when you knowingly violate the Constitution. You stopped being a cop the minute you decided the law didn't apply to you. They shoved Bryce Harlan into the back of the Suburban. The leather seats were nicer than his cruiser's plastic bench, but the cage was just as tight. As the door slammed, Sergeant Griffin walked over to Darius. He looked defeated. He handed Darius's license and the FBI badge from the evidence bag. "I'm sorry, Agent Kane," Griffin said quietly. "He's been a problem. We knew it. We covered for him. Blue wall and all that." Darius took his badge. He polished the gold shield on his hoodie. "That wall just fell on top of him, Sergeant. And if you don't want to be under the rubble, you're going to give a full, honest statement about everything you saw today and everything you've seen him do before." Griffin nodded shamefully. "I will." "Good." Darius turned to Agent Burke. "Is the drive safe?" "Tech guys are checking it now," Agent Burke said. "Looks recoverable. We can still make the RICO indictment." "Good," Darius said. He looked at the Suburban where Bryce Harlan was screaming at the window. "Then let's go. I have a meeting in New Orleans and I'm already late." The silence inside the FBI Suburban was absolute. It wasn't the silence of peace. It was the silence of a vacuum, a void where Bryce Harlan's future used to be. The drive to the federal building in New Orleans took some time, but to Bryce Harlan, it felt like years. He sat in the middle row, his hands cuffed behind his back, squeezed between two tactical agents who smelled of gun oil and indifference. They didn't look at him. To them, he was no longer a brother in blue. He was a suspect, a two in custody. When the convoy pulled into the underground garage of the federal courthouse, the reality began to set in with stinging clarity. Bryce Harlan had been to this garage before, usually to drop off high-level detainees or to testify in joint task force cases. He always walked in through the side doors, joking with the marshals, grabbing a coffee from the break room. Today he was pulled out of the car by his tricep. The grip was firm, unyielding. "Watch your head," an agent muttered, not out of kindness but out of liability protocol. They marched him past the elevators he used to take straight to the U.S. Marshal's holding area. The booking officer was a woman Bryce Harlan recognized, Deputy Marshal Karen Pritchard. He had flirted with her weeks ago when dropping off a warrant. "Karen," Bryce Harlan pleaded, his voice cracking. "Karen, you know me. This is insane. You gotta let me make a call." Pritchard didn't make eye contact. Her face was stone. "Step up to the line, prisoner. Face forward." "It's me, Bryce. Tell them who I am." "I know who you are, Harlan," she said, her voice dripping with a cold professionalism that cut deeper than an insult. "Turn around. Hands on the wall." "Hands." She patted him down. It was thorough, humiliating, and efficient. She removed his belt, his shoelaces, and the hidden handcuff key he kept stitched into the back of his waistband. A trick of the trade he thought would save him. She tossed it into a plastic bin with a clatter. "That's contraband," she noted, marking it on a clipboard. "Add it to the file." They fingerprinted him. They took his mugshot. The flash of the camera blinded him for a second, leaving a purple spot in his vision that wouldn't go away. Then they stripped him of his uniform. The uniform he had worn like armor. The uniform that made him feel invincible. They handed him a bright orange jumpsuit, stiff with starch and smelling of industrial detergent. When he put it on, Bryce Harlan ceased to be Officer 492. He became inmate. Later, Bryce Harlan sat in a stark white interrogation room. His wrist was shackled to the table. Across from him sat Special Agent Burke and a neatly dressed man from the Department of Justice's Civil Rights Division, a prosecutor named Grant Ellison. Grant Ellison opened a thick file folder. He didn't look angry. He looked bored, which terrified Bryce Harlan more than rage would have. "Mr. Harlan," Grant Ellison began smoothing out a piece of paper, "you are currently facing charges under 18 U.S. Code Section 242, deprivation of rights under color of law, because a dangerous weapon was used, your baton and your service weapon, and because kidnapping was involved. The maximum sentence is life in prison or the death penalty, though we rarely seek that for non-homicides. Bryce Harlan scoffed, trying to summon the ghost of his old bravado. Kidnapping? I arrested a suspect during a traffic stop. I have qualified immunity. You can't touch me. Qualified immunity, Grant Ellison said, looking over his glasses, protects government officials from liability in civil lawsuits. We aren't suing you, Bryce. We are prosecuting you. This is criminal court. Immunity doesn't apply when you knowingly violate the Constitution. I didn't violate anything. I smelled marijuana. Bryce Harlan slammed his free hand on the table. That gives me probable cause to search and detain. It's my word against his. Agent Burke leaned forward, placing a small silver thumb drive on the table. Bryce, Agent Burke said softly, you know, Agent Kane was driving a rental. Yeah, drug mule car. It was a Chevy Tahoe Premier. Did you know that vehicle has a cabin air quality monitoring system? It logs particulates regularly to the cloud. Bryce Harlan blinked. So, Agent Burke continued, sliding a graph across the table. This is the telemetry data from the moment you pulled him over until the moment we arrived. The air inside that cabin was cleaner than the air in this room. 0 hydrocarbons, 0 smoke, 0 THC particulate. Bryce Harlan stared at the graph. The line was flat, dead flat. Machines malfunction, Bryce Harlan stammered. My nose doesn't. We also have the audio, Agent Burke said, from Agent Kane's phone. He started recording the moment you walked up to the window. We have you calling him boy. We have you ignoring his offer to show credentials. And we have the dashcam footage from Sergeant Griffin's cruiser, which caught the entire conversation between you and Griffin, where he told you to stop. Bryce Harlan's face went pale. Griffin is backing me up. He knows the code. Grant Ellison sighed and opened a second door. Sergeant Wade Griffin walked in. He wasn't in cuffs. He was wearing a suit. He looked tired, shameful, but free. Tell him, Sergeant, Grant Ellison said. Griffin wouldn't look Bryce Harlan in the eye. He stared at the floor tiles. I cut a deal, Bryce. I'm sorry. I have time left until my pension. I can't go to prison for you. I told them everything. I told them about the stop today, and I told them about the cash you took from the driver on I-12 last month. Bryce Harlan felt the air leave the room. The cash? The civil forfeiture he had pocketed during a stop of a Mexican national who couldn't speak English. He thought nobody knew. You rat, Bryce Harlan whispered. You dirty rat. I'm resigning effective immediately, Griffin mumbled, but I'm not going to jail. You are. The indictment came down days later. A federal grand jury took less than a stretch to return a true bill on all counts. The story broke on a morning. The headline on CNN was simple. Badge betrayed. Federal agent assaulted by local police in racial profiling incident. But it was the video that set the world on fire. Agent Kane had pushed for transparency. The Department of Justice released the edited dashcam footage. The internet devoured it. Within hours, the video had millions of views. The public watched the split-screen reality. On the left, Darius Kane, calm, polite, hands on the wheel, informing the officer of his status. On the right, Bryce Harlan, aggressive, sloppy, screaming, his hand hovering over his gun like a cowboy in a bad western. The moment Bryce Harlan smashed the Pelican case with his baton became a gif, a symbol of incompetent rage. The moment the FBI helicopter roared overhead became a moment of cinematic catharsis that people cheered for in living rooms across America. Bryce Harlan was in solitary confinement for his own protection. General population inmates would have killed a cop in minutes, but he had a small TV in his cell. He watched the news anchors dissect his life. They interviewed his high school teachers. They interviewed people he had arrested previously. A pattern emerged. He wasn't just a cop who made a mistake. He was a bully who had been hiding behind a badge for years. His lawyer, a court-appointed federal defender named Nolan Graves, visited him a stretch later. Nolan Graves looked exhausted. It's not good, Bryce, Nolan Graves said, sitting on the steel stool in the attorney visitation room. Get me out on bail, Bryce Harlan demanded. My dad has the house deed ready. Bail is denied, Nolan Graves said flatly. Judge Ford ruled you a flight risk and a danger to the community. And honestly, you're safer in here. There are protests outside the courthouse, Bryce. They're chanting your name and not in a good way. So, we fight it, Bryce Harlan said. We go to trial. A jury won't convict a cop in Louisiana. Nolan Graves rubbed his temples. Bryce, the jury pool has seen the video. The telemetry data is bulletproof. Griffin is testifying against you. The feds have a high conviction rate. If we go to trial and you lose, you're looking at years. If you plead now, I might be able to get you less. No, Bryce Harlan snarled. I'm not pleading guilty to being a criminal. I did my job. I want my day in court. Nolan Graves packed up his briefcase. He looked at Bryce Harlan with a mixture of pity and disbelief. Okay, but remember, you asked for this. The trial of United States versus Bryce Harlan began months later in the intense heat of a New Orleans August. The federal courthouse was a fortress. Barricades were set up to hold back the press and the protesters. Inside courtroom 4, the air conditioning hummed, battling the humidity. The room was packed. Every seat in the gallery was taken. Darius Kane sat in the front row behind the prosecution table, wearing a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly. He looked like a statue of resolve. Bryce Harlan sat at the defense table. He had lost weight. His skin was pasty from months without sunlight. He wore a suit his father had brought him, but it hung loosely on his frame. Grant Ellison, the prosecutor, didn't shout. He didn't pace. He stood at the podium and spoke to the jury, 12 men and women from diverse backgrounds, as if he were telling a sad story. Ladies and gentlemen, the badge is a symbol of trust. It is a heavy weight. Most men and women carry it with honor. But on that day, the defendant, Bryce Harlan, used that badge not as a shield for the innocent, but as a sword for his own ego. He saw a man he deemed suspicious based on nothing more than the color of his skin and the cost of his car. He ignored the law. He ignored the truth. And when he was caught, he tried to destroy the evidence. The defense attorney, Nolan Graves, tried his best. Officer Harlan had to make a split-second decision in a high-stress environment. He believed he was in danger. He believed there were narcotics. He was wrong, yes, but being wrong is not a crime. The trial lasted days. The prosecution's case was a master class in forensic reconstruction. First came the tech expert from Chevrolet. He explained the air sensors. He showed the jury the graphs. The air was pure, he said repeatedly. There is no scientific possibility that marijuana smoke was present. Then came Sergeant Griffin. He cried on the stand. He admitted to the culture of silence in their precinct. He admitted that Bryce Harlan had a nickname, the Hunter. He admitted Bryce Harlan targeted out-of-state rentals because they usually pay the fines and don't come back to fight it. But the turning point was Darius Kane's testimony. Darius took the stand on the day. He walked with a military cadence. He swore the oath and sat down, his posture perfect. Grant Ellison walked him through the stop. Agent Kane, at any point, did you refuse a lawful order? No, sir. I complied with every command, even the ones that violated policy. Why didn't you resist? You are a trained federal agent. You could have physically overpowered Officer Harlan. Darius looked at the jury. His eyes were dark and serious. Because, sir, I knew that if I made a sudden movement, if I raised my voice, Officer Harlan would have shot me, and the narrative would have been that I was resisting. I wanted to go home to my family, so I relied on the law to save me rather than my fists. The courtroom was silent. Then it was Nolan Graves' turn to cross-examine. He tried to rattle Darius. Agent Kane, isn't it true you were sarcastic with the officer? You told him to check the glove box instead of just handing him the ID. I was handcuffed, counselor, Darius said calmly. I couldn't hand him anything. I told him where my credentials were. He chose to ignore them because they didn't fit the story he was writing in his head. But you had a classified device in the trunk. Don't you think that looks suspicious? Wires, a hard drive. To an untrained eye, perhaps, Darius conceded. But Officer Harlan didn't ask what it was. He hit it with a baton. He tried to pry it open. That is not investigation, counselor. That is vandalism. Nolan Graves faltered. Darius was unshakable. Every question Nolan Graves asked just gave Darius another opportunity to highlight Bryce Harlan's incompetence. Against the advice of his lawyer, Bryce Harlan insisted on testifying. It was the final nail in his coffin. He got on the stand and the arrogance returned. He couldn't help it. He felt the need to justify himself. "I know what I smelled," Bryce Harlan insisted, leaning into the microphone. "That sensor is wrong and he was acting hinky. He was looking at me in the mirror. Who does that?" "A driver who is being tailgated," Grant Ellison suggested during cross-examination. "No," Bryce Harlan snapped. "A criminal checking for cops." "Mr. Harlan," Grant Ellison said, walking closer, "you stated you thought the badge was fake. Did you call dispatch to verify the number?" I didn't have time." "You had time to tear apart the car. You had time to smash a Pelican case. You had stretch. Why didn't you run the badge number?" "I thought it was a prop." "Or," Grant Ellison said, his voice dropping to a dangerous whisper, "did you not run it because you were afraid it was real? And if it was real, you'd have to let him go. And you didn't want to let him go, did you? You wanted to win." "I am the law on that highway," Bryce Harlan shouted, his face turning red. "I decide who goes." The outburst echoed in the courtroom. The jury recoiled. Bryce Harlan froze, realizing what he had just said. He had just admitted it wasn't about public safety. It was about power. Grant Ellison smiled a shark-like grin. "No further questions, Your Honor." The jury deliberated for hours. When they returned, Bryce Harlan stood up. His legs felt like jelly. He gripped the table so hard his knuckles turned white. "We the jury," the foreman read, "find the defendant Bryce Harlan on count 1, deprivation of rights under color of law, guilty." Bryce Harlan let out a sob. On count 2, obstruction of justice, guilty. On count 3, destruction of government property, guilty. On count 4, false imprisonment, guilty. Bryce Harlan slumped into his chair. He looked back at his parents in the gallery. His mother was weeping into a handkerchief. His father, a retired mechanic, looked at the floor, unable to witness the shame. Darius Kane didn't cheer. He didn't fist bump. He simply nodded once to the prosecutor, stood up and buttoned his suit jacket. Months later, the sentencing hearing took place. Judge Harlan Ford was an old-school jurist known for being tough but fair. He looked over the bench at Bryce Harlan, who was back in his orange jumpsuit. "Mr. Harlan," Judge Ford began, his voice booming without a microphone, "you have disgraced your uniform. You have eroded the public trust. When a police officer breaks the law, it is not just a crime. It is a betrayal of the social contract. You took an oath to protect the Constitution, and instead, you treated it like a nuisance." The judge picked up a stack of letters. "I have received letters from your family asking for leniency, but I have also received a victim impact statement from the United States government detailing the damage you did to an active federal investigation. And I have seen the video. I saw a bully. Bryce Harlan, I sentence you to months in federal prison, followed by years of supervised release. You are remanded to the custody of the U.S. Marshals immediately." Bryce Harlan closed his eyes. Years in a cage. His career was over. His pension was gone. His right to vote, his right to own a gun, his identity, all gone. As the marshals moved in to cuff him, Bryce Harlan looked across the aisle. Darius Kane was there. For a brief moment, their eyes locked. Bryce Harlan looked for sympathy, for mercy. He found none. He found only the cold, hard reflection of his own actions. Darius walked out of the courthouse into the blinding Louisiana afternoon. The humidity wrapped around him, familiar and heavy. Reporters swarmed him at the bottom of the steps. Microphones were shoved in his face. Agent Kane, do you feel justice was served? Agent Kane, what do you say to the people calling this a victory for civil rights?" Darius stopped. He raised a hand and the gaggle of reporters quieted down. "Justice," Darius said, his voice steady and projecting clearly, "is not a victory. It's a correction. Today the system worked because we made it work. But justice would have been Officer Harlan checking my ID, nodding, and letting me drive away shortly after he stopped me. Justice would have been me making it to my meeting on time. What we saw today was accountability, and while accountability is necessary, it is always the result of something having gone wrong." He looked directly into a camera lens. "To the good officers out there, wear the badge. Don't hide behind it. And to the citizens, know your rights. Document everything. The truth is the only weapon you have. Darius turned and walked away. He moved through the crowd, past the barriers and toward the parking lot. He reached his car, a sleek black sedan, his personal vehicle. He opened the door and slid into the driver's seat. He started the engine. The air conditioning blasted cool air into his face. He checked his mirrors. He put the car in drive. As he pulled out onto the street, he saw the transport van leaving the courthouse garage. Through the mesh wire of the back window, he saw a silhouette of a man in orange, head bowed, disappearing into the shadows of the penal system. Darius Kane didn't linger on the image. He had work to do. He had a team to lead. And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked clear. He turned on the radio, merged into traffic, and drove on strictly following the speed limit. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is the story of how Officer Bryce Harlan learned the hardest lesson of his life. The badge on your chest gives you authority, not immunity. He judged a book by its cover, and that book turned out to be the Federal Penal Code. It took time for his ego to write a check that his freedom couldn't cash. It's a stark reminder that in the age of cameras and accountability, corruption has nowhere to hide. Darius Kane stood his ground, not just for himself, but for every innocent driver who had been bullied on that stretch of highway. If you enjoyed this story of high-stakes justice and instant karma, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. Subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new story. And tell me in the comments, do you think the sentence was enough for Harlan? Let's talk about it. Thanks for watching.